We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 49b. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah said that the only time a shomer brings a carbon shvua is in a situation where, let's say, the shomer, he denies responsibility, he takes a false oath, and then what really happened would have made him chayiv. So in other words, what he swore to was a way of exempting himself in a situation where he really was chayiv. But let's say, for example, he took a false oath, but he really would have been patur had he told the truth. So in that case, there would not be a carbon shvua. And the Mishnah is continuing along these same lines. Let's say the owner says to the shoel, so he says, what happened to my shore? And the shoel responds, mace. He says that it died. Now in this case, the shoel actually is responsible for the animal dying because the shoel is responsible even for accidents. Vahusha nishbar o nishba o nignav o ava. Now let's say again, what the shoel swore to actually was false, but in reality he's chayiv anyway. He's chayiv based on what he said when he said mace, and he would be chayiv as well in the situations of nishbar where it's injured, or nishbar where it's captured, or nignav o avad where it's stolen or lost. And the Mishnah goes through other scenarios. Again, nishbar, let's say he says it was injured, v'hu meis o nishba o nignav o avad, but really it died, or it was captured, it was stolen, it was lost. Or nishba, he says it was captured, v'hu meso nishbar o nignav o avad, but really it died, or it was injured, or it was stolen, or it was lost. Or nignav, he says it was stolen, v'hu meso nishbar o nishba o avad, but really it died, or it was injured, or it was captured, or it was lost. Or avad, he says it was lost, v'hu meso nishbar o nishba o nignav, but really it died, or it was injured, or it was captured, or it was stolen. So again, in all of these cases, what he's saying makes him chayiv, and what actually happened makes him chayiv. And mashbiacha ani, let's say the owner says, I'm going to give you a shvua, v'amar amen, and he says amen, he takes the shvua, so pater. So in this case, he's going to be pater in terms of the carbon shvua. But the Mishnah continues, Heichan shori, if the owner says to the shoel, where's my axe? Amar lo, he says to him, Eini yodea matasach, I don't know what you're talking about. V'hu shemezo nishbar o nishba o nignav o navad, but really it died, or it was injured, or it was captured, it was stolen, or it was lost. So in this case, what he's saying actually would exempt him from payment, because he's denying any knowledge whatsoever about even being a borrower. But in reality, what happened would be mechayev him. He'd be chayev for all these various kinds of accidents, or if it's stolen, or if it's lost. And mashbiacha ani, again, in this case also, the owner administered an oath to him. He said, I'm giving you an oath, v'yamar amen, and the shoel said amen. So chayev. So in this case, he actually would be chayev the carbon shvua, because again, what he swore to, that false shvua, was getting him out of an obligation. And the Mishnah continues, Amar lenose sachar v'hasocher, let's say he says to the paid watchman, or he says to the renter, Heichan shori, where's my ox? Amar le, he says, mace, it died, and again, that would be a claim that gets them out of paying. V'hu nishbar o nishba, and let's say what actually happened was, it was injured, it was captured, so either way, really, he would have been exempt, even if he would have admitted that it was injured, or that it was captured, he'd be exempt. And similarly, nishbar, let's say he says it was injured, v'hu meis o nishba, but actually it died, or was captured. Or nishba, he says it was captured, v'hu meis o nishba, really it died, or it was injured. Or nignav, he says it was stolen, v'husha avad, and it was actually lost. Or avad, let's say he says it was lost, v'husha nignav, and it was actually stolen. Now in these later cases, the shomer sachar, for example, is actually chayiv on gneva v'aveda. The socher is chayiv on gneva v'aveda. So in this case, what he's claiming would obligate him, and what actually happened would obligate him. So in this case as well, there's not going to be a carbon shvua. So mashbiachani, in all of these cases, if he says, I'm going to give you an oath, v'yamar amen, and the person says amen pater, he is going to be exempt from carbon shvua. Now again, mace o nishbar o nishba. Let's say you have a situation where he claims, the shomer sachar, or the socher claims it died, or it was injured, or it was captured. These are claims that actually would exempt the shomer sachar, or the socher. V'hu nignav o avad, but in reality it was stolen or lost, meaning in reality he would have actually been chayiv had he admitted to the truth. He'd be chayiv for gneva and aveda. And in this case, mashbiach ani, says, I'm going to give you a shvua, v'yamar amen. He says amen, chayiv. In this case, he actually would be chayiv to a carbon shvua. Avad o nignav. Now let's say he claims it was lost or stolen, essentially claiming that he's chayiv. V'hu meis o nishbar o nishba, but in reality he's actually pater because it died, or was injured, or was captured. Mashbiachani, he says, I'm going to give you an oath. V'yamar amen, he says amen pater. In this case, he's pater because in this case again, what he actually said was going to be mechayiv him, and the reality was he's actually pater. And so the Mishnah says, Zahaklal, this is the rule. If the person changes, if he deviates, he takes a false shvua, but it's from obligation to obligation, he would have been obligated anyway. Or let's say it's from exemption to exemption, he would have been exempt anyway. Let's say it's a situation of exemption to obligation. So again, in that situation as well, so pater, he's going to be pater, because in that case, again, let's say p'tor l'chova, he's saying he's chayiv, when in reality he's pater, so you're not going to have to bring a carbon shvua. It's only in the following case, case, mechova liptur chayiv, only in a situation where really he's obligated, but he was meshane, and he lied, and he took a shvuah, and he said he was potter, then he's going to be chayiv in carbon shvuah. And zeh klal, this is the rule. Kol hanishba lo hakel al atzmo, anybody who takes an oath in order to make lenient against himself, essentially to make himself exempt, chayiv, so for that false oath, he's going to be chayiv a carbon shvuah. But lahachmer al atzmo, but if it's in order to be stricter on himself, so then potter, then he's going to be exempt. And the Gemara says, Man Tana Arbo Shomer, who's the Tana of our Mishnah that has 4 watchmen? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua. Rav Nachman says that Rabba bar Avua says Rabbi Meir. He, the author of our Mishnah, is Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara says, Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman, Mi iko Tana de les le Arbo Shomer. Is there any Tana that doesn't agree to the 4 watchmen? What do you mean that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir? Everybody agrees that there are 4 Shomrim. The Gemara says, Amar le setem hachi ko amin alach. This is what I was saying to you. Man Tana, who's the Tana of our Mishnah? De Amar socher kenose socher dami. In our Mishnah it says that a renter has the exact same halacha as a Shomer Socher. Like we said, a Shomer Socher is chayiv for Geneva v'Yaved. And our Mishnah says the same is true by a Socher, that a renter is just like a Shomer Socher, and he's chayiv for Geneva v'Yaved. So who's the author of our Mishnah that says that a Socher is like a Shomer Socher? And on that, Amar Rabba bar Avua says, Rabbi Meir, again, the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, that a socher is like a shomer socher. The Gemara says, 1 second, for Rabbi Meir, ipcha shamin alei. But Rabbi Meir, he actually says the exact opposite. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, the Mesoras Hashas over here says, tzarech lomar de Tanya. What it really should say is, as we learned in a Brisa, socher keitzad meshalim, when it comes to a renter, how does he pay? What is a socher considered the same as? Rabbi Meir omer kashomer chinam. Rabbi Meir here says like a shomer chinam, not like a shomer socher. Rabbi Yehuda omer kanosei socher. Rabbi Yehuda says that a socher is like a shomer socher. So why is Rabba bar Avua saying that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir? And the Gemara says Rabba bar Avua ipchotani. Rabba bar Avua just happened to learn it in the reverse, that actually it's Rabbi Meir who says that a socher is like a shomer socher. The Gemara says Hani Arba. Here we're saying that there are 4 shomrim. Hani Arba Haver, are there really 4 of them? Shloja Haver, there's really 3, because there's really just 3 categories, since socher and shomer socher are treated exactly the same. The Gemara says Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says Arba shomrim, there are 4 watchmen, v'dinei and shlosha, but there are 3 categories in terms of the laws with respect to the 4 shomrim, because again a socher is either going to be like a shomer socher or like a shomer chinam. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Amar l'shomer chinam v'chulu. Again, he said to the shomer chinam, etc. Heichen shori v'chulu. Where's my axe, etc. Amar li'achad b'shuk v'chulu. He said to one of the people in the marketplace, etc. Amar l'shomer v'chulu. He said to the shomer, etc. Heichen shori. He said, where's my axe? Amar lo eini yodeh matasach v'chulu. He said, I don't know what you're talking about, etc. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, V'kulon petur mishvua shomer. In all the cases in the Mishnah where we said again they're exempt from the shvua shomer because they're not making a claim that gets them out of liability. Again, let's say they're making a claim that they're potter, but they're already potter, or let's say they're making a claim that they're chayiv, but they're already chayiv. Again, in all of these situations where there is no liability in terms of shvua shomrim to bring the carbon shvua, however, v'chayav and mishum shvuas bitoy, but still they are chayiv to bring a carbon olav yored because of a shvuas bitoy, because essentially they did take a false oath. It's not a false oath that was going to get them out of an obligation, but it is still a false oath, so they're chayiv because of shvuas bitoy. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Af Peturan Mishum Shvuas Bitoy. It's not true. They're exempt from Shvuas Shomer, and they're also exempt from Shvuas Bitoy. And the Gemara says, B'mai kamiflagi, what exactly are they arguing about? Shmuel Savar Lesa Bilahabo. Shmuel says it's not considered in the category of Shvuas Bitoy because it can't apply in the future tense. Let's say you have a situation where you're taking a shvua that the animal died, so you're not going to be able to do that in the future, that the animal will die. That's not going to be possible. And so therefore that doesn't count as Shvuas Bitoy in terms of obligation of Shvuas Bitoy. V'Rav Savar, but Rav holds Isei Belav V'Hain. There's no requirement that it has to work in future tense. There's just a requirement that you have to have a possibility of taking such a shvua in the negative and the positive, which is certainly possible over here. You're going to take a shvua, let's say, for example, that it was stolen or it was not stolen. Those are both possible. The Gemara says, but didn't Rav and Shmuel already argue about this? The Itmar, because it was stated, Shevuos shazorak plonit sror layom. Let's say a person takes an oath that so-and-so threw a pebble to the sea. Or Shevuos shalo zarak, or let's say an oath that he did not throw the pebble to the sea. So this obviously works in both the positive and the negative. So is there going to be a liability here for Shevuos bitoy? Rav Amar Chayev, Rav says, yes, there's a liability. Ushmuel Amar Potter, and Shmuel says exempt because you can't do it in future tense that so-and-so is going to throw a pebble into the sea. We don't know about that. So Rav Amar Chayev, the Isa B'Lavehain. Again, Rav says there's liability because it's possible in the negative and the positive. Ushmuel Amar Potter, and Shmuel says Potter, the Lesa B'Lahaba, because it's not in this person's control in terms of what this other person does in the future. In any case, this seems to be exactly the same machlokas that we have over here. And the Gemara says, no, tzricha, it's necessary to teach it in both cases. Because if we only had it in this case, the reason why Rav says it over here is because the person is taking the Shavuot on his own, meaning to say, in a situation of Zorak Ploni Tzror Layam, he's taking that Shavuot on his own, and so maybe over there Rav says there's a liability of Shavuos Bitoy. But in our case, where it's the Bezdin that's making him take the Shavuot, that's talking about by the case of a Shomer, so Ema Modi Leila Shmuel, I might say that he admits to Shmuel that in such a situation the person is actually exempt from Shavuos Bitoy. And why would there be an exemption from Shavuos Bitoy? Kid Rabbi Ami, that would follow the teaching of Rabbi Ami. To Yamar Rabbi Ami, because Rabbi Ami said, Kol Shavuot Shahadayonim Mashbi an Osa, anytime you have an oath that's administered by the judges, Ein Chayav an Olem, Mishum Shavuos Bitoy, the person is not liable for Shavuos Bitoy. And we could say the other way as well, V'iyetmar Baha Kamar Shmuel, if we only had it in this case of the judges administering the oath, that's where Shmuel says there's no Shavuos Bitoy, there's no liability. But we would say in the case of Zarak Ploni Tzror Layam, maybe he would admit to Rav that there is a liability, and so tzricha, that's why it's necessary to teach both cases. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we just said above, the statement of Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami says, Kol Shavuot shehadayonin mashbi'an osa, any oath which the judges administer, ein ba mishum Shavuos Bitoy. So there is no halach of liability in terms of Shavuos Bitoy by such a Shavuot. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, O nefesh kisi shava levate bisvasayim. It says, Kisi shava levate bisvasayim me atzmo. We understand that means that Kisi shava, he takes the Shavuot specifically on his own. It's not forced upon him, it's not administered by Bezdin. Kid Reish Lakish, and that understanding of the pasuk, reading the pasuk in that way, is following Reish Lakish. Diyam Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish says ki mishtamish be'arba lashonos. The word ki can be understood in 4 different ways. It could be understood as if. Dilma, it could be understood as maybe. Ella, it could be understood as rather. Daha, it could be understood as because. We'll see Rashi in a moment, but the idea over here is that we're understanding the pasuk in this fashion. Rabbi Ami is understanding the pasuk that the word ki means if he takes a shvuah, meaning to say it's voluntary, he's doing it on his own. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Lazar says, Kulon Peturin Mishvuas Shomrin V'chayavin Mishum Shvuas Bitoy. In all of these cases, when we say that the person is exempt from the Shvuas Shomrim, there is a liability in terms of Shvuas Bitoy. Chutz me'eni yodea ma'atasach, the shoel, except for the case of I don't know what you're talking about by the shoel, because in that case there's already actually a liability of Shavuos Shomrim. If there's a liability of Shavuos Shomrim, then there's no Shavuos Bitoy. And also Ugneva v'Aveda denosei Socher v'Sheva Socher, and also the case mentioned in the Mishnah of Gneva v'Aveda by Shomer Socher and by Socher, again where there was a liability to carbon Shvuah in terms of Shavuos Shomrim, Shehu Chayiv. So in those cases there's a liability of Shavuos Shomrim, Sharei Kafra Mammon, because they actually did deny money. And so again in those situations we're going to say that since there's a liability in terms of Shavuos Shomrim, there is no liability in terms of Shavuos Bitoy. And Rashi explains, Kulon, in all of the cases, meaning Kol Hani Peture de Masnis, in all the cases of exemption in the Mishnah where the person is exempt from bringing the carbon shvuah for Shavuos Shomrim, Peturin Mishvuas Shomrim. The Petur, the exemption is only from Shavuos Shomrim. Kilomar Me Asham de Shavuos HaPikadon. That's a way of saying they're potter from bringing the carbon Asham for Shavuos HaPikadon. However, V'chayavin Mishum Shavuos Bitoy. However, they are liable because of Shavuos Bitoy. This is Rav's opinion. L'sha'avar, because this is a Shavuos Bitoy in past tense. They're taking an oath about something in the past and they're saying a false oath, and there you have to bring a carbon olav yored. For that you have to bring a carbon olav yored, which is the sliding scale carbon chatos. Im shagag bekarbon kidin shvuah l'shavar. It has to be specifically where the person was beshogeg. He knew that what he was swearing to was false and he knew that was wrong to take a false shvuah, but he did not know he's liable to the carbon. That's the case where you bring the carbon kidin shvuah l'shavar, like the halacha is by any time you have a past tense oath. Biomer yodeya anish shvuah zu asur. It's specifically in a case where he says I know that the shvuah is forbidden. Aval but I did not know that the person is liable to bring a carbon. Belav vehein, it has to be according to Rav. It just has to be that it could be in both the negative and the positive. Like for example, nignav velo nignav. You could take a shvuah it was stolen or it was not stolen. But less a belahaba. But it's in this case it's not possible to do it in the future tense. And Shmuel says that's needed, and that's why there's no liability for shvuas bitoy. For example, yamus velo yamus. You can't take a shvuah it will die or it won't die. Shazu shvuas shavi. That actually is considered a a oath in vain. It's not considered a Shevuos bitoy lahaba, that's a false oath. It's just considered in vain. She'ein biyad l'kaim. It's not something that's in his power to be able to fulfill it. And so therefore that's why Shmuel says there is no liability for Shevuos bitoy. And Rashi continues, Kisi shava meyatzmo. Again, the understanding of Rabbi Ami is that we understand the pasuk of Kisi shava to mean that the person is taking the oath on his own. That's when there's liability for Shevuos bitoy. Mashma kid Reish Lakish. That's understood like the way Reish Lakish understands the word ki in the pasuk. V'hai Kisi shava beloshon idarshin Allah. We're learning the word ki as meaning if, meaning im tishava, if you take a shvua. Da'ayna meyatzmo, meaning he takes the shvua on his own. V'lo shvuas dayonin shehi bal karcha. We're not talking about a shvua administered by the judges, which is against his will. V'Rav darish le beloshen dahan. Now Rav disagrees. He darshins the pasuk as being, he understands the pasuk that the word ki means daha, because shaharei tishava, that because you're going to swear, harbe yishavu al pi bezdin, there are many who swear through bezdin, it's administered through the court. V'alon namiksiv karbanol of yored, and in that case also there's a karbanol of yored. B'she'ein ba kfiras mamon shetachayvenu asham. As long as there was no denial of money, in which case he would have been chayiv to bring a karban asham, that would have been the karban shvua for shvuas hapikadon. But if you're not chayiv the karban shvua for shvuas hapikadon, again, that's why Rav says there is a liability for shvuas bitoy, and it doesn't matter that it's administered by the bezdin according to Rav, because he understands the word ki, he understands that it means because. And Rashi continues, Rebbe Lazar Omer Kulon Hanach Peturin de Masnis, and Rebbe Lazar says all the cases where the person is exempt in the Mishnah, it means Peturin Mishvuas Shomrim, it means he's exempt in terms of Shvuas Shomrim, in terms of that liability of Karban Shvua, V'chayavim Mishum Shvuas Bitoy, but he is chayiv in terms of Shvuas Bitoy. The Rebbe Lazar Svir like Rav. The idea over here is that Rebbe Lazar holds like Rav, and then Rebbe Lazar finishes Chutz Me Eini Yodeya Matasach, except for a case where he says, I don't know what you're talking about, the Shoel, referring to the Shoel, Ugneva V'Aveda the Shomer Sachar V'Asocher, Ugneva V'Aveda by the Shomer Sachar and Socher. Again, these are both cases. The Gemara here is referencing cases where there's a liability to Shvuas Shomrin. To Katani Buba Masnis and Chayiv, it says in the Mishnah the word Chayiv. Hahu Chayiv, that word Chayiv is Shvuas Shomrin. It just means when it says the word Chayiv in the Mishnah, it means you're Chayiv in terms of Shvuas Shomrin. Sharei Kafru Mammon, because there was a denial of money. Uvahid the Shomer Chinam Shatan Avad V'hu Achlo. Now, there were some other cases in the Mishnah. Why are we only mentioning Shoel and Shomer Sachar and Socher? There was a case of Shomer Chinam of liability also. There was a case where the Shomer Chinam claimed it was lost, V'hu Achlo, but really he consumed it. Uvatoin Nignav, where you could have a case where the Shomer Chinam said it was stolen, V'hu Gan, when he really stole it. To Katani Bamasnisin, there it also says in the Mishnah, Hoda Me'asma Meshalim Karen V'chomesh V'yasham. It says when he admits he has to pay the principal and a fifth and bring an asham. So why doesn't Rebbe Lazar include that case as well, where we say again that there's going to be a liability in terms of Karban Shvuas of Shvuas Shomrim and not Shvuas Bitoy? And so to that Rashi says, Lo, it's Strichale Rebbe Lazar Limimnin. With that, Rebbe Lazar doesn't even need to mention that. He doesn't need to count that. Gabe Hanachutz, he doesn't say that yet. He doesn't have to say with the exception of that Shomer Chinam case, to Behedya Parshlu, because that's already clear in the Mishnah. It actually says Parshlu Tana Chomesh V'Asham to Shvuas Shomer. It actually mentions the fifth and the Asham of Shvuas Shomer. The point is, Rebbe Lazar is trying to clarify the word Chayiv. What does the word Chayiv mean? The word Chayiv means Chayiv in terms of Shvuas Shomer. And that's already clear by the case of Shomer Chinam, so he doesn't need to mention it. Hadron Alach Arba Shomer. We will return to you, Parak Arba Shomer. This is the end of the 8th Parak of Mesechet Shevuos and the end of Mesechet Shevuos. If you're enjoying this channel and these videos, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will begin in the next video, Meseches Avodah Zarah on Daf Beis Amud Aleph.